So, Rich, thanks for coming on the show. It's a
Awesome to be here, man.
pleasure to have you in town.
I
It's been a
appreciate
while.
you. It's like between two ferns. I don't know if the camera angle,
Yeah.
you can see both sides, but there's one on each side. So I'm just waiting for some sort of Zach Galifianakis-esque type of questioning sequence
Oh,
coming
yeah.
at me.
I should have worn my vest or something. Get look awkward and stuff.
Oh, man. Uh,
But yeah, thanks for coming on the show. You know, wanted to just learn more about how you went from being a math teacher to becoming a professional fighter, and if you could share some of that journey.
you always tell people that I actually tell this story, and I can deliver it in a way that it sounds very believable. So I'll just off the rip tell you that I'm joking. But no, I've said this several times in interviews that I was in a class one time, and one of my students got kind of smart with me, so I smacked him around a little bit.
Yeah.
And then I ended up getting fired from my job. So they had the state mandated an anger management program, which ended up being martial arts. But yeah, so it's actually quite believable when I tell it, and people look at me like, "Oh my God, you're a terrible human being."
Right. It makes sense, right?
No, I grew up my entire life. I was an athlete playing sports just, from the time I was in the third grade till the time I graduated high school. I
What
played
kind of sports?
mostly football.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like my main sport. But I'm one of those kids that tried everything. I tried my hand at baseball. I'm a terrible baseball player. Put like a bat or a club in my hand. It's
Right.
like my athletic kryptonite. I'm like, oh. So, no, I tried, like, I did swimming one year. Never really, I did swimming 2 years actually, but never really cared for it. Ran track a couple years, played basketball. I like playing basketball. I'm one of those formerly decent basketball players.
Yeah.
I'm horrible now.
Could you dunk?
Yeah, no.
Could you dunk
I
back then?
could at one
Yeah.
time. Barely, but yeah, I could. And
I could touch the rim, the bottom of the rim.
yeah, my ball handling skills are terrible.
Yeah.
But I'm significantly taller than you too,
Right.
though, right? So like, I should have been able to throw down easily, but it's like I could just barely get over the rim. But no. And then when my senior year, and I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of me in high school, but I was not the epitome of athleticism at that point in my life. So my senior year, when football was over, I was just looking for something to do, and I had gotten into martial arts. So I thought, like, well, I can train this, and nobody knew what mixed martial arts was at that time. It was.
Well, what martial arts did you start with?
I started with a traditional, because my dad, when I was younger, when I was like the age of 12, like I said, kind of tried everything. So about 2 or 3 years from the age of like 9 to 12, I did a Shornryu, Matsubayashi Ryu,
Karate.
Japanese style karate. Yeah, very traditional. And then I got back into that in high school because at the time there was no MMA, there was no UFC, nobody knew anything better. And I spent my Sundays after church with my father watching Kung Fu theater. So that was fighting to me, right?
Yeah.
And I mean to everybody else at that time. And so that's what I got back into. And I just did that more or less to kind of quench the athletic thirst that I have. And I thought, well, there's tournaments and things that you can do that will kind of help with the competitive nature of the desire for sport that was now lacking in my life, because I was not getting a scholarship to play college ball or anything. That wasn't happening. So that's how I got into martial arts. And then after training for a couple years, I saw, like everybody else, I saw the first UFC.
Yeah.
And that was the year that I graduated high school, actually. And it just suddenly clicked, like, okay, this is real fighting. I mean, like everybody else, I watched the first one and I was like,
You saw
just
Hoist
get up.
Gracie
Just get
choking
up.
somebody.
Yeah. Pull up Kung Fu theater here.
Yeah.
Exactly. This was my Sundays after church. Every Sunday we watch this stuff with the terrible voiceovers that they did.
I used to watch this with my grandma. My grandma had all these tapes, VHS of all this. So I watched every single one of them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, we love this stuff, man. You go straight from hearing Jesus to right into people getting killed by nunchucks and everything else.
Yeah.
So yeah. But no, so I was training all through college just as a hobby, but I'm one of those people that if I have a hobby, it consumes me typically. And so by my senior year of college, I had, of course, now MMA is kind of an established thing.
Right.
It's still not mainstream, don't get me wrong, but it was more of an established thing. And I had been training all through college. I had started on BJJ. My instructor's son had spent some time overseas. He had done a little bit of Muay Thai. So I had been exposed to some other martial arts at this point in time. And on a dare, basically. One of my friends said, like, all you do is train, so why don't you just give this a shot? And so I took a local fight in a small promotion. We went to watch one first, and I was like, yeah, I could do this. So then I went and did one, and it was more hobby for me. And it really was to satiate, like I said, that desire for competition in sport. But all the meanwhile, I was in college. I was studying to be a high school math teacher. I graduated, got my job teaching. So it's weird
grade
because
did you teach?
most all high school, freshman to senior, everything but calculus, basically. And so, because people often think like I just one day was teaching and then the next day I'm like, I'll just go fight. Right? I mean, that's kind of the thought, but
it's like the 10-year overnight success, right?
Yeah, the reality is that I had been training for years and years and years, and it was something that I enjoyed doing. And so after 5 years of teaching full time, I entered that year and thought, I wonder if I could do this full time. And I was my manager at the time, a gentleman by the name of Monty Cox. You know Monty, I'm sure. And so he and I had a conversation, and we were actually sitting outside of a Dave & Buster's. And I said, "Do you think I could do this full time?" And he looked at me and said, I think you'd do really well at this. He said, but there are no part-time champions. And so I had started my 4th year of teaching, and that was at that point in time that I decided I'm going to make this my last year, or at least I tried to take a sabbatical. Like I was just going to take a leave of absence and then pursue this and see what happened. But looking back from this perspective now, it's actually kind of crazy, the thought process that I had to think like I'm going to make a living doing this, because circa 2002.
Yeah, the money wasn't good.
No. But Lord had a different kind of plan for me, and it ended up that the sport started moving more mainstream because I did the second season of The Ultimate Fighter after I won my title, and it projected not only myself but the sport into a completely different stratosphere. It became a bit more mainstream at that time, and then the pay started going up. So I ended up doing much better as a professional athlete than I did as a teacher for sure. But no, it was just that's how it happened, and it's really not any kind of secret. I mean, the reality is this, and I would tell my students this all the time when I was teaching, like, pursue your dreams. I had a young lady in my classroom who wanted nothing more than to be a Rockette, the Rockette dancers. And I said, pursue your dreams. I mean, if that's what you're aiming for, maybe you don't ever end up becoming a Rockette. Quite possibly you could. Crazier things have happened. If people saw pictures of me in high school, they'd be like, "There's no way." Like, I would have been like voted last guy in the class to become a world champion fighter for sure. Yeah. So I mean, crazier things have happened. But if you end up missing that dream, like if I didn't end up winning a championship, there are other ways when you're pursuing a dream to find a career, as a coach or something else, a way to be
parlay it into something else.
Yeah, you never know. And so. She didn't end up majoring in like dance in college or anything like that, but I do remember getting an email from her a couple years later. She told me, my parents wanted me to be a teacher, oddly enough, and I'm discouraging her from being a teacher. And she said, she kind of told the story. She said, but I just want you to know, she said, I am actually in the dance industry. I'm teaching kids dance, and I'm really happy. And so in a weird way, like it comes back full circle, like that dream of hers or that passion ends up becoming part of her life. And so I live by that my whole life. Like if there's something that I'm passionate about, like I'm going to pursue that. And I've been fortunate enough that, when I was in high school and I chose my major, I wasn't super passionate about teaching at the time. Actually, this is a whole different discussion. I think that I just didn't realize it because I'm a teacher by heart. I mean, you know me. If you spend time with me, it's a conversation with me is about information exchange.
Information, coaching,
ideas. And or learning. Like I'm a lifelong learner as an educator. I'm like, it's like, if I'm going to have a conversation with you, we might start talking about nutrition. I'm like, well, try this or that or whatever, and I'm educating you on nutrition. But at the same time, you might say, well, have you ever tried this? And I'm sitting there like, oh, no, do tell, because I'm soaking up information. So it's never a one-way street, but I don't think I realized that at the time that I had chosen teaching as a profession. And I always tell people that I love teaching, but and I love math. Like I'm a very deductive reasoning, left brain kind of mathematical guy. Like in everything.
To a math or geometry based physics now, and it's pretty interesting how the numbers around us are telling us something.
Oh man.
Yeah, but that's another rabbit hole.
You could get me. I'll tell you what. The numbers around us scream design 100%, bro. So, but then I'm going to get into a whole, theological discussion on God. So, and it's crazy to me that how you can look around and some people just don't see it. But anyway, that's a whole different discussion.
We'll save that for the next one.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. Maybe we do it on the back end, but but so fortunately for me, I've always I've lived a life of passion, man, and I've pursued sport, and then once I got out of sport, I actually opened up a restaurant for a couple years down in LA, and I thought I was passionate about that because I'm passionate about nutrition, but being passionate about nutrition and then running a food and beverage brick and mortar restaurant is not.
Yeah, because you're dealing with people.
Yeah, well, that's not even the thing. It's just
it's a whole different.
Yeah, because I think I'm a people person. I think, but yeah. Anyway, and then of course now I'm still in the MMA industry working on promotional side of things, and so and I've done some great things for One Championship and with One Championship and. Everything from working in the merchandising department to helping Matt with the sports and competition department to running my own
tell us more
travel
about
show.
Your role at One Championship.
Oh, dude, how much time do we have? Because
we got time.
I'm just saying, like, I don't have a specific job description. Right. I'm kind of like, to use the football analogy, like that flanker back where they're like, hey, just go over here and play this position for a second. All right, now we need you over here. Hey, you're going to actually throw the ball on this play, even though you're not the quarterback. Like, so that's kind of how they use me in the company. Right now, we are working on our expansion into the U.S., and so I'm doing a lot of work with the athletic commissions on this side.
How's that coming along?
It's moving well, man.
Yeah.
I'm not going to divulge any secrets yet, but we're like things are going well for us. So that's between that and I do some commentary. Those are my two main things at this point. But still, they'll piece me in here, there. Hey, we need you to attend to this thing or go meet these people,
and you also had a show back in the day. Before the pandemic, where you traveled the world and explored.
That's already back in the day.
Yeah,
like back in the day to me, it's like the 80s or something, man. Like
things move fast these days.
Technology, like back in the day. You mean like 2021 and 2022? That's already back in the day. Yeah. So that probably my favorite job for the company was running the Warrior Series project. I ran a smaller league that fed into One Championship. So my job was to go around on One Warrior Series. It was actually Rich Franklin's One Warrior Series, but to travel around and then recruit talent on that show. And essentially, it was cool, man. I had full autonomy, creative autonomy, so I could choose. Okay, granted we have certain athletes from different countries that we were trying to recruit, and we were primarily working on that side of the planet. Right. So, but then we started expanding the last year that the project ran under my tutelage. We were headed to the United States and Brazil and one other country that was in a different hemisphere, essentially, and then obviously COVID shut all that down. But it was cool, man. I got travel and was like, okay, let's make up a storyline here, create a storyline, story arc this thing. We're gonna do something cool. I got an idea. Let's go whitewater rafting in this episode, and the
meetings must have been fun for that.
It was, man. Sitting down with your production team and just saying like,
where are we gonna?
Because it's a creative element, right?
Yeah.
So that was fun.
Did you guys discover? I mean, of all the places you've been to, where did you discover the best talent you have today?
The best talent the best signing that we did was the very first episode where I found Stamp.
Oh, wow.
Stamp Fairtex.
So she was discovered from that show.
Yeah.
And she's a huge star for One Championship.
And I knew as soon as I saw her, I signed her, and I was working with her management. I'm like, listen, and everybody else that shows up, we had this tryout, and everybody else that showed up was like, please let me in the organization, and they were like, we'll think about it type of thing. I was like, no. So like I had to go into salesman mode, and then finally I got them in because they were just obviously anybody that's going to sign, they're weary of making sure that their athlete is taken care of,
and they knew that she was special.
Oh yeah, I knew that she was special.
And you knew that. So what was it about her that you thought, like, how does somebody who's looking for talent see that talent when maybe that other person
Well,
doesn't believe that. Yeah.
It wasn't about seeing the talent. It was about hearing the talent. Actually, we were holding a tryout, and I had 2 athletes that were trying out in front of me, and I was sitting there like at my table, like making notes like this, and then all of a sudden I hear this cannon explode to my right, Woof, boom, and I'm like, what the? And I look over, and it's this
like 100-pound
100-pound Thai girl just smashing pads, and I got 2 guys trying out here, and suddenly I'm just like this the whole time, like, and I was like, all right, yeah. I knew right away as soon as I saw her kicking, like you could tell, and realistically speaking, at the tryouts, her ground game was still a little green, and she had some work to do, but you could tell that she was putting in the work. And then subsequently, like I signed her to my organization as soon as she fought in the Warrior Series. Chatri saw her right away and was like, "No, we're taking." I'm like, "Let me get some mileage out of this girl, you know. Like, let me give her a few just to, you know, and get her in." And but you could tell right away the moment she stepped into one, like every fight, you could just see her ground game, like her skill levels just change. And so I mean, that's just the mark of a world champion. She's looking at her deficiencies and fixing those things. When she was on top of when she fought Ritu Phogat and went for the armbar on Ritu, I'm like, you're arguably fighting the best wrestler in your weight division, and you're willing to give up topside position when your grappling game is not necessarily that refined. Yeah, exactly. And so that's what. But I mean, and you could just see it every single fight. She just gets better and better, and more confident.
Yeah, I actually watched the Indian movie on Rita's family.
Yeah. Dangal.
Yeah,
great movie.
That was a good movie.
Yeah,
it's pretty interesting how they trained back over there.
Yeah. The Kushti wrestling in the dirt. Yeah. So when one of the episodes that we did for the Warrior Series, I was in Mumbai.
Oh, really?
And we did that. It's actually quite cool when you go to the training facilities, and the mud. They basically treat the mud with mustard seed oil and turmeric. Because
what does that do?
The mud feels like it like balls up the mud a little bit, and or the dirt or whatever. It kind of makes it a little wet feeling. But the turmeric and the mustard seed oil, these things are antibacterial and they're anti-inflammatory. So it was really cool because the mud essentially, like as you're wrestling, has kind of a therapeutic benefit. But we were laying there, and essentially when you're done wrestling, and I don't know if you know much about Indian culture, but men are very touchy with each other. Like you'll frequently see men walking down the street, maybe holding hands or arms interlocked. And so when we were done training in the facility, like we're laying there in the mud and we're just all kind of chatting, and then suddenly I have a couple guys that start like rubbing mud on me, which is a very weird thing from an American perspective. Like, dude, like, what are you doing? We don't do this in my gym.
We just met.
Yeah, exactly. We just met. You got to earn this, right? So no, but like come to find out, it's just the way that these teams, like they'll take care of each other that way. They'll start rubbing mud on you, and then that mud, obviously with the turmeric in it and whatnot, has these therapeutic anti-inflammatory benefits when you're done training. And so it was just really cool, like seeing how this team worked in this scenario. That's the nice thing about doing a lot of the travel that I did for the Warrior Series, that you experience a lot of culture. And you know, granted, as a fighter, I mean, these aren't the wealthiest people in the world, so you're not, like I was traveling, I'm not staying at places like the Four Seasons. Like we're staying in little villages and huts, and
like just really connecting with the community.
Yeah, and so I learned a lot about different cultures at that point.
Yeah, it also opens your mind, right? So that you come back to America and things are just, it's different.
Well, I met a guy. I met an American man who was working as a tour guide in the Philippines, because we were in the Philippines, and one of the activities that we did was we did a canyoning expedition, and the gentleman who owned the company was a guy from Virginia, and he had moved to the Philippines years ago, maybe like back in the 70s or 80s type of thing. He was an older man, and when we were doing this, and I was talking to him, and he said, he said, I lived here for a few years, he said, and then I was here for, I don't know, maybe like 10 years or something. He said, and I started getting homesick because I'm living in the Philippines and it's not home. And he basically described me best, that he said, I traveled back home, and when I got back home, he said, suddenly it didn't feel right anymore. And he said, and what I realized is that when I got back home, it was exactly the same way that it was, but I had changed. And so it kind of creates a situation where when you've been introduced to all these other cultures and different ways of thinking, then you take that back home with you, but you typically go back to a place where people don't have these kind of experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, like in the Midwest in Ohio,
Right.
there's not a ton of international travel in places like that. Or when people do travel internationally, they're typically going to a resort where they're not exposed,
Right.
not truly exposed to a culture. It's like, well, yeah, you went to Mexico technically, but you were in Cancun. Like,
Right. And you're
that
staying at a
doesn't
nice
really
place.
count, you know. So, but then you suddenly, like, when you come back and you realize, well, my way of thinking is slightly different
Mm-hmm.
than everybody else's. Now, that's not to say that there are certain things that are just pillars in my life. I have a certain worldview that I see. Like, I believe that I believe in God. I believe
Mm-hmm.
there's a creator in the
Right.
universe, and I believe in Jesus. And like these things, they won't change because
Mm-hmm.
I've done so much study on these subjects that in my mind, they're infallible truths.
Right.
So no matter who I meet from a different culture, like it's not that certain things in my life will ever go away, but it does. You see poverty at a different level, for
Mm-hmm.
example, outside of the country. And when you experience that and it puts things in perspective of like, oh yeah, no, because what I grew up in junior high, for example, I was very poor in the U.S., but compared to what
Compared
I've
to
seen
somewhere else.
yeah, I'm almost ashamed to even use the word poor
Right.
coming out of my mouth after having been to countries like Cambodia
Uh-huh.
or the Philippines, Smoky Mountain Philippines. Google that one, Smoky Mountain Philippines. It's crazy
So-
when you experience that place.
Is that where the what's that one team is?
No, this is Smoky Mountain Philippines.
Oh wow.
It's a trash. It's basically like it's a trash heap, and this is people build their houses out of the trash, and they
Really?
live there. And so this is when you talk about poverty, it's like anybody in the U.S. that talks about growing up poor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when you see that, it's like no.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up in anything like that. Poor was having trouble paying your electrical bill because your air conditioning was set at
Yeah.
69 degrees rather than 73 degrees.
Yeah, and even if you consider poor here, they still have an iPhone. That's
Right?
$1,000, $1,500 phone these days.
Yeah.
And
So I've been to places like this. I've been to Dharavi in Mumbai.
Mhm.
I've been to Charpin in Lahore. These are some of the worst slums in the
Yeah.
world. But the beautiful thing about a place like that,
Uh-huh.
like in Dharavi, like you can see this picture right here, like in
Right.
Dharavi, there's an ecosystem within Dharavi where like certain people will walk around Mumbai and they'll collect plastics, and then they'll bring the plastics into someone like within the slum, and then the person in the slum will take those plastics and then refine them into something else that's usable,
Wow.
like something like a car fender or something
Uh-huh.
like that. And then they subsequently get sold, and there's this ecosystem where within that slum, everybody takes care of each other.
So it's almost like a barter system, if
Yeah,
you will.
and they're like I said, it's just a community within itself where they really do look out for each other, and that's the beauty of those kinds of things. You go to a place like that and you think that you would be in danger, or that it would, that there's a ton of violence there, but there's not. It's you really do walk into a place like that. Or when like I said, when I was in Charpin, it was the same thing when in Pakistan, that these people, they look out for each other, and you see this, and you see. Honestly, like that picture that we saw, that little kid walking around the streets there, it's like that kid's probably one of the happiest little kids
Yeah.
that you would ever meet. And they have nothing. They're filthy dirty, but she's probably
But they're
happier
happy.
than 90% of the kids that
Yeah.
attend schools here in the U.S., man, for real.
No,
They have an
that's-
appreciation for life at a level that it would be difficult to understand growing up in a country like America.
Right. And even places like that, I feel it can get distorted even further, because you go to a spot where it's just significantly wealthy,
Mm.
and then you're looking at these slums and you're like, yeah, how do you connect the two? Right?
Well-
because we have that here, but it's almost hard to distinguish.
Well, it's like the Bible says, man, what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul, right?
Mhm.
And Denzel Washington, he has a great quote. I love his quote. He says, you never see a hearse. You never see a U-Haul following a hearse, right? Because you can't take any of this stuff with you. So at the end of the day, I mean, you can have the nicest car, the nicest house, whatever. But for me, life is, walking through Dharavi, life is all about experiences, experiencing a place like that, meeting the people like that. And at the end of the day, if I'm laying on my deathbed, I'm not going to care about what kind of mattress I'm laying on, and whether it was a $5,000 mattress or a $20 mattress. I'm just going to care about the loved ones that are there next to me, right? I mean, that's family and community and relationships is what life is all about. I've lived in, I'm from Cincinnati, but I've lived in a couple different places in the world. And having worked for one, I moved down to Singapore for almost 5 years. And when I first got there, I just remember this feeling of like loneliness because I didn't have a social circle. I had my colleagues, but everybody's busy doing their stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so I didn't have this social circle built in. And it was very lonely. I'm like, what is this all about?
Right.
Then,
So you had a lot of time to reflect and
for sure,
figure out what's important and what's going to make you happy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not stuff, that's for sure.
Right.
Yeah, but I mean, even though Singapore's a cool place, but at the end of the day, I'm like, nah, man, I need my people.
Right.
I need my tribe.
So then you moved back to Cincinnati recently, right?
About a year and a half ago.
Year and a half.
Yeah.
So
build a house.
Yeah. Have a swim in a pond.
Yeah. Well, I talk about having nice things and how they don't matter, but I built a really nice house. Right? Like all the hypocrisy coming out of my mouth.
Right. But at least it comes from a place of what do we call that?
Humility, humbleness,
humility, thankful.
Yeah,
right?
Gratitude.
That
would be a good word
because
for that.
It's not like you built a house for vanity reasons. Like you worked hard. You built something that this is a culmination of your life's work.
Yeah, I think for me, this is probably that left side math brain. I mean, I built a house, and the house I built is custom, and unfortunately, I like unique things, but unique is actually a euphemism for expensive. Right. Like if I could find unique things that aren't expensive, it'd be great. But so I built this very unique house, but at the same time, it has equity in it. So mathematically, it makes a lot of sense because if ever I were to sell the house and I have good equity in the house, so it was overall like the build and the land that I have was a good investment.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always ask, when I meet people for my, real business, what comes next, right? You get to that place where you have all this equity and whatnot. You sell the house, then what? Right?
For me, I mean, you can kind of.
Is there a legacy behind what you're?
I don't
trying to build or.
Nah, you hear things like this. These things are so cliche at this point in time, but it's like I don't have children, but if I did, at some point in time I'm going to die, just like my father did. And I talk about my father and the impact that my dad made on me or my mom when she passes away, and then my kids would hear that, and then they would remember little bits of that, and some of that might get passed down to. That would be her grandkids or my father's grandkids, but that might get passed down to the great grandkids. But beyond that, like, I don't even know who my great grandfather was, and which means I definitely don't know anything beyond that. And so essentially, within a generation or two, you're basically completely forgotten. But the impact that you make on people is that's the ripple effect, right? My dad instilled in me a work ethic, and so whether or not if I had kids and they knew him or not, like that work ethic would get passed down to them, amongst other things. But that's just one example. And so it's like, but that seed was planted by him, which was probably planted by my grandfather, which was probably planted by his father, and so on and so forth. It goes. And so it's that impact that you have on people realistically. So when we talk about legacy, I really don't care. I don't care if my name is erased from history books. Like none of that matters to me. I don't. You read about people like an Alexander the Great or whatever, and I sit and think, well, how much of that is actually true anyway, and reliable? I mean, history's written by the winners, and so. But at the end of the day, it's being a good human being, having impact on other people, whatever that is for you, and because that's the thing. It's people they talk to you about success. It's like, well, how do you define success?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? Is it the amount of dollars I have in my bank account? Because my life is probably more than halfway over at this point in time, and so I can keep accumulating dollars, but what good is
it going to do?
Yeah. Someday I'm going to die, and that's going to get divvied up amongst people that I love and organizations and churches and help poor people out and whatever I'm going to do with it. And so it's like, but between now and then I can have an impact on people. And so I just think about that. Something as simple as a hello, a smile that you give a person, or taking the time to sit down and give someone advice, to actually physically helping people, with things, whether it's financially or some other way. And so for me now, the next phase of my life, part of me is being a professional athlete. You have to be a bit selfish as an athlete because life revolves around you, your training, whatever. I mean, this is just the way that life is for any kind of sports figure, celebrity, actor. It doesn't matter, whatever.
Yeah, the team comes for you and helps you.
And so I've spent, and not that I don't see myself as a taker. That's not what I'm saying. But I've spent enough time in my life as being a taker that now I've really tried to focus on being a giver. For example, like one of the episodes we did for the Warrior Series, we went to Bali. The athlete that we recruited, his sister, I can't remember what kind of condition that she had. It wasn't Down syndrome, but something like that where she was disabled. And I don't even know if that's the right word. I don't even know what the politically correct word is. And I don't even want to say something that's not politically correct because I'm not trying to offend people. But either way, we went to this facility where they cater to younger children that have conditions in similar situations. And we reached out to this yoga coach and paid her to come in and teach these kids a yoga class because the facility said the kids here really like doing yoga. So we're like, well, we'll come in and we'll do a yoga class with them then. So we provided yoga mats and brought these things into the school, which is, charitable donation. But the coolest part about it was that we brought this yoga instructor in and she had so much fun teaching the class and just got so much out of working with these children that she said, I'll do this once a month with the kids for the next year. And she had to travel like halfway across Bali to get there. So it wasn't an easy thing for her.
Own dime and time.
And it's just one of those things where you do something good and you involve other people and then they also want to pay it forward. And it's just one of those things that just kept giving. And so being able to be part of things like that, I think, is the next phase of my life. I mean, granted, I still have to pay my bills and make money, but I'm more focused on those aspects of life than the greatness of Rich Franklin.
Right. Now, speaking of the greatness, right, we're going to go back, right? How would you say what, how you grew up and what your father taught you about work ethic, plus being a math teacher, helped you progress in your career to become the UFC champion, right?
Growing up, I grew up in a blue-collar, hard-working family. My mom and dad divorced when I was young. We weren't very wealthy, and my mom was a hard-working single mom. My dad was a hard-working man he was a product of the 60s. My dad graduated in 1970, so just after the Summer of Love, and was part of that whole whatever in high school. Barely graduated. And so then when he had me, he thought I was like the best thing ever because I was like his smart kid, right? It's like he's good at math. I don't know where he gets that from. But growing up in a family like that, it's funny. You always say, if I had children, I would say, I want to give my kids the things in life I didn't have. But it's the things in life I didn't have that made me who I am. Right? I'm not taking horse riding lessons at 5 and taking monthly snowboarding trips out to Aspen and Whistler and places like that because we couldn't afford those kinds of things growing up, right? I mean, we barely put food on the table, and so I didn't have those experiences. And I would think like at one time I thought I would want to be able to give my kid that, but then when I think, I'm like, well, I wouldn't want to be able to give my kid that because if you're giving your kid that becomes normal for them. Like that is their normal. And so then they don't understand. So the only way to really create that appreciation, I have an appreciation for, like we talked about my house. I truly appreciate this house that I've built. I truly appreciate just, especially anything material in life that I have. Like God has really blessed me financially. And so I have an appreciation for these things. I don't take anything for granted that I have. And I think that these are the lessons that I was taught. Seeing my father go back through college, he and I graduated college at the same time, or seeing my mom just work.
So do you feel like they got inspired by you?
No, I don't. No, my dad started university before I did. It took him forever to graduate.
Right.
But he woke up one day and he was working in a plating company where they basically nickel plate machinery, like pistons for like bulldozers and things like that. And he's just working in this environment that wasn't good for his health, and he didn't make great money, and he wanted to improve his life, so he decided to go back to become a nurse.
Wow. And
it took him nearly a decade to finish university, And so I saw my dad at one point in time working this job in this factory, taking a part-time job at a convenience store gas station, on the weekends umpiring softball for extra money. And then when we would come over, like, when, my mom, they had visitation rights. When I would come over to my dad's house, there were times where we would walk around and do things like collect aluminum cans because it was money.
Right.
And so I can countless memories of me and my brother walking up and down the railroad tracks, like just picking up aluminum cans, or along the side of the road and picking up aluminum cans. And so it was my dad's constant hustle, like, no, I'm going to make myself better. I'm going to make myself better, because the choices he made early in life, obviously, he woke up at some point and was like, this isn't going to cut it, and I need to make a change. And so I think seeing that during my adolescent years was crucial for me, that I'm not going to settle for my current circumstances. I'm always going to try to improve, whatever that improvement may be, whether it's financial or whatever. And then on the flip side, seeing my mom as a single mom just working, grinding 80-hour weeks, back to back all the time. And even though we grew up poor, like I don't ever remember a Christmas where we didn't have gifts, or a Thanksgiving where we didn't have food on the table. I do remember a time when I told our neighbors that we didn't have any food in the house, and then on Thanksgiving they brought us over a full dinner. Wow. Man, was my mom pissed. She was so mad. But I mean, I think by not having food in the house, I meant like I didn't have Lucky Charms to eat for breakfast or something like that.
It's not like what,
yeah, I wasn't starving or anything, but no, I just, my parents, they worked, and not working wasn't an option, or with my dad with college, like not succeeding wasn't an option. And so just seeing this grind, and I think that experiencing that and having that kind of childhood, like when that mentality is in your parents, then they're going to instill that in you. And that's exactly what I would instill in my children. Like there's a no quit attitude. Right. And that's really what made me successful, even in sport. I'm not the most gifted athlete in the world, but I was just like, well, I'm going to pursue this thing, and I'm going to outwork. I'm not going to stop. Right. And I mean, fortunately, I loved it, because I don't believe in sacrifice necessarily. People talk about all the sacrifices they made. I'm like, I never really made any sacrifices for my fight career, because I was doing exactly what I wanted to do. Right. That didn't make it easy. Like, nobody loves conditioning nobody loves doing road work on a January morning in 8 inches of snow when it's like -5 outside. Like, nobody loves that.
When it's raining.
It's just part of the job. I can remember, dude, this was before my Dan Henderson fight. I was doing this road work, and I was running outside, and it was in January, and there was like 6 inches of snow on the ground. And I come off my street, and I go into, because I live on this like main street, and I go into this neighborhood, and as I go into the neighborhood, there's this school bus full of kids, and I thought, all these kids were looking at me running, and I thought, like, this is my Rocky moment, like where I'm running up the stairs and the kids are following him, right? I was all pumped, and I'm running out in the snow, and it's freezing outside, and these kids are just looking at me like from the bus, like, look at this moron running in the cold weather. What a dummy! And it was,
this guy thinks he's in a Rocky movie.
It was nothing like the Rocky scene at all. Nothing. So, yeah, but yeah, I mean, we talking about sacrifices and whatnot like that. I didn't view that at the time as a sacrifice. Realistically, when you're pursuing a dream, the people that have to sacrifice is everybody around you, because they're the ones that, it's not their dream, it's your dream. Right. They're the ones that have to make sacrifices.
Yeah. And I think it's awesome too, because being a coach or whatnot, and being part of a team, there is pride in like the guys that helped you, right? So in a way, it's like they feel like when you win the championship, they win the championship.
Well, I talked about that. I actually, in my I wrote a retirement letter, and that's exactly what I talked about. And people ask me, like, do you miss fighting? I'm like, well, heck yeah, I miss fighting. I miss the camaraderie. Yeah. I mean, because you've helped me in camp, right? Yeah. And so you know what it's like when we're running, we're running the stairs, where we're on the Tiger Mountain, and we're in the gym, and I've done like,
we're in San Diego, running the sand.
Exactly, right, dude. Oh man, yeah. So pushing that stupid sled that just buried down, and Matt standing on that thing, thinking like, oh yeah, I'll just stand here, like. And then when I asked the coach, he's like, no, you put like maybe like 20 pounds on that thing, because the sled, it was this makeshift wooden sled that was just sitting in the sand, and it was like, it was designed to just be pushed on its own, like it wasn't designed. And then Matt's like, no, we'll just stand on this thing, and I'm just like, not moving, just kicking up sand.
I think we ended up winning that race.
But no, in my retirement letter, I wrote about how when I was fighting, I felt like a general uniting my troops. And you have all these people that are behind you, everybody from the coaches to the training partners to your family to your friends, to even the fans,
Right.
right? Like because the fans unite behind you, and all these people support you, and they all in their own way. And my family would move holidays, like, oh well, Rich is getting ready for a fight,
Right.
so let's push Thanksgiving back a couple weeks, type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what it's like when you're competing, and it's that camaraderie that I miss,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it's very difficult to replicate because you literally bleed, you sweat and bleed with these people, right? But the thing is that when you win a piece of that victory, it belongs to them, but when you lose, and that also belongs to them as well. You know, I jokingly told my mom at one point in time that I was coming out of retirement, and she literally she started crying, and she looked at me, and she and it was the way that she said it to me. She said, "We've been through our wars. We have been," and it was like we have been through our battles. Like we can relax now. And I was like, and it was just very apparent at me at that time that when she said that, like every time I lost, like man, she lost too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Piece of them lost too.
Yep.
And so I get it. You know. So how did you decide? You know, you had your camp out there in Cincinnati. What made you come out to Washington during a portion of your career?
Well, so after I lost my title to Silva, I called Monty and I said, hey, I'm not unhappy with my coaching staff, but we're kind of isolated in Cincinnati. I'd like to take a look, just get an outside perspective on my camp. Do you have any recommendations on coaches I should work with? And Monty said, well, every time one of my guys loses, Matt Hume's standing in the opposite corner. It's like, so I would go to him.
Right.
So I was like, all right, fine. So I didn't want to because Seattle's way on the other side of the country, right? I mean, it's a 5-hour flight almost from Cincinnati. Yeah. So, but Matt and I worked together, and I was within, you know, a couple days, 100% sold on, you know, he came down to Cincinnati actually to work with me because I was quite busy with travel. But I was sold immediately, and so then I started coming up here, and you know, initially I was bouncing up for camps, and it was kind of that way. But the frequency of me bouncing up here became greater and greater because at one point in time I was like staying with a couple friends, and then finally I got my own condo and was like investing more time and had a car up here at one point.
Yeah, really cool car.
I still have it.
Oh, you still have it?
Yeah.
You brought it back there with you?
I did. I had it shipped back to Cincinnati, so it's painted black now. It looks like it's a '72 Chevy C10 step-sider pickup. Yeah, no, and really so cool it's painted black. It has this like Mad Max type of paint to it. Yeah, it's not a show quality car, but it is fun to drive.
Well, you use it. I mean, it's meant to be driven, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you know, when I'm like, I feel like driving my old truck today. I usually drive it once or twice a week.
And another thing you can't take back, so you might as well use it.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So and it's a head turner. When I pull up to a light, people are like, wow, like it's cool. Like unique stuff.
Yeah.
That one wasn't so expensive though.
Right.
Yeah. It was a little bit cheaper version of unique.
Yeah. Big shout out and a huge thank you to Zekin for making this happen. They have an amazing platform. Check out their website, zekin.com, zeacon.com. So what would you say was different about Matt's approach versus what you experienced before that?
Oh, I would say the main difference is that I learned the value of drilling up at AMC with him. Matt drills and drills and drills, and I knew the value of drilling prior to that, but coming up, it was that era as well, but you come up and you're training in the school of hard knocks, right? It's just sparring and throwing down heavy-handed stuff and just getting beat on, and your body taking way more abuse than it needed to. And so training with him, like we would drill and drill, and that's what made me good at martial arts. You know, I have a propensity for this sport well over any other sport that I've ever done, but I have a good learning curve, adaptability in this sport, and so other intangible things that made me good at martial arts. And it was the drilling, and I've always been heavy on drilling. Don't get me wrong. It's like if somebody teaches a move in a class, an armbar or some sort of transition or a guard pass or whatever, like I don't need to learn 6 things in a class. Like show me one and maybe an extension of that, and I'd rather do that thing 500 to 1,000 times than 5 or 6 different things, 1 or 200 times a piece, right? And so, but man, Matt took that to a whole different level, and he reminded me that you don't need to actually just bang all the time. And but it does take an extensive level of mental focus in
Yeah.
order to be able to do that, because when you're sparring, I mean, you know, you've done this. When you're sparring, you just get in and autopilot, what
Right.
you've been trained to do kind of comes on. And
Yeah.
there's some thought processes, like I'm collecting data and you're moving a certain way. I'm like, oh, okay, he's dropping that hand, or, you know, he's leaving that rib open, so I'm gonna feint this side
Yeah.
and come back with the liver shot, whatever. But overall, you're just kind of flowing and moving.
It's automatic.
Yeah.
Right? So like even yesterday on Tuesday I sparred, right, and a guy threw a straight, and without even thinking, I just, you know, veered to the right, right. So it's like I didn't think about it. It was
Yeah.
just years of you see that shoulder move,
Yeah.
you move.
But when you're drilling a new move, it's like you
Yeah.
have to pay attention to every single detail of
Right.
what you're doing, and you're constantly like, it's like you're just like sharpening and sharpening and sharpening the sword, and it's a very cumbersome and mentally fatiguing, as well as physically fatiguing, but exercise to do, especially when it's for an extended period of time. So I definitely learned the value of that. Yeah, you see this picture here of me on top of Matt with my hand on his throat. I'm sure I got there because he allowed me to.
Right. Yeah. You ever roll with Matt live?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to, all the time in camp. I used to. I remember the first time we worked together. I ever tell you this story? Oh, man.
I've heard the story, but I'd like you to share it.
Yeah, no. The first time he and I worked together, we drilled for about 3 days straight, and I was so sick of drilling. And finally, Matt, I just told this story the other day. Matt looked at me and he says, "Okay." He goes, "We need to get you grappling a little bit live now and see if we can apply some of this stuff." And I was like, "Okay." And so I'm kind of like, I'm looking around the gym like, who can I grapple with here? And Matt's like, "I'll grapple with you." And I was like,
You're like looking at it.
Cute. Oh gosh, man, that was like grappling a wet blanket, man.
Yeah.
It just, so I couldn't get him off me. And when you grapple with Matt, he makes you do things that are bad ideas that you think are good ideas, right? Like I'm side mounting. I'm like, I'm just gonna roll this way and give up my back, even though I know I shouldn't, but it feels like the right thing to do. Like he forces
he's not doing anything.
Yeah, right. Like he just, it's like he like, I don't know, forces you into these situations without. Yeah. So, but no, yeah, it's yeah, I've grappled with him, and so I remember one time we were actually up at AMC grappling together, and it was the first time that we had been working together for a couple months at this point, but we were doing some drills and guard drills, and finally I stood up on him, and it was the first time I stood up, and then I celebrated like I won a fight. And he was like, "Careful about how much you celebrate, man."
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh no!" I was like, I don't care what this costs me later, man.
This is victory.
Yeah, this is my victory."
Celebrate the small wins, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, in your transition from the fight game to the, you know, professional world, business world, did you find that a lot of what you learned in, you know, training applied to the business world, and how did you handle that?
It does. I mean, first of all, you have to have a good, you have to have a good head on your shoulders,
Right.
in anything that you do. You want to be a fighter. I have this one of my favorite scenes. There's a movie called The Program. Have you ever seen that movie?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
football movie.
Uh-huh.
Great. It's a great movie. Like,
Oh,
it's a really good football movie, man. And there's a character in that movie. His name's Alvin Mack.
Which one was he again?
He was the linebacker.
Okay. Was the guy with the long hair?
No, that's Latimer. The
Latimer,
one that
yeah,
was
yeah,
the one
yeah.
that was
Like the
juicing.
crazy one. Yeah, yeah.
No, Alvin Mack that's Alvin Mack right
Okay.
there. And he, like, this guy, he was, you know, he's the guy on the team that's going to sign the NFL contract. Okay, spoiler alert here for
Right.
anybody that hasn't seen this movie, but if you haven't seen this movie, sorry, it's like, I don't know, 25 years old now.
Right.
He ends up on this crackback block and messes up his leg. And but there's a scene in the movie where he's in college and he's not the smartest student, and he's getting tutoring, and this tutor's like trying to help him, and he's super frustrated. And the tutor looks at him and goes, "Alvin, you need to be able to do this." He goes, "Man, all I need to be able to do is sign an NFL contract." Right? And then it cuts to that scene right there.
Right.
That scene right there where he's in the film room, and he's the defensive captain. And they're like, they're looking at this slides of formation. And it's like, "What do you do here?" And he's like, "You know, I don't know, whatever, red zipper 32." And he's just like boom, kill the quarterback, do this,
Right.
do that, and he's just like crack, 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 and he knows his stuff because his intelligence is geared towards that. Like he really understands the game of football, and people wouldn't obviously think of that as your typical intelligence. Like he's not solving physics equations while doing that kind of stuff, but nobody else could run a defense the way that this character could run the defense either, and so you have to have a good head on your shoulders if you're going to be successful at anything in life.
Mm-hmm.
That you do. But the other lessons that you learn about the fight game taught me things, and I don't know if these are lessons that the fight game taught me or these are lessons that I brought into the fight game. Probably is more the case that made me successful at that. But it's like the no quit attitude, never settling. Even now, I'm you can look at me and tell that I'm probably in better shape now. I'm not in fight shape, but I'm in better shape now than I was as a fighter. Right. And so, I'm probably realistically, if I wanted to fight, probably 4 months off my mark from a conditioning perspective. But I maintain that level of training, and it's just this discipline that I have in my life, right? And so it's those things that I brought into the fight game, and it's those same qualities, that no quit attitude, never settling for the current situation. Like I wouldn't say I'm on a pursuit of excellence or on a pursuit of perfection, but I am definitely on a pursuit of excellence. And it's having that kind of mentality along with having a good head on your shoulders, like having a good IQ or EQ. These things they're necessary in order to do business really in any realm. Right. As a fighter, you're not just a fighter. You have to be able to market yourself and speak to people and
sales,
do well on camera. And so all these things are important. And so all these skills transition over to business. And so my way of, for example, approaching a fight, film breakdown, strategy, setting up a strategy for winning a match is no different than setting up a strategy for succeeding in a business. Yeah. Really. I mean, you're focusing on a fight rather than business, but being able to look at an objective and say, here's my objective. Let me break this down. And where's my path of least resistance? What are my resistance points? Right. What are my possible obstacles that I'm going to have to overcome, and so on and so forth. And so I think what fighting did for me is it gave me the resilience that I need, that the moment that I hit something that is a potential roadblock in life, I immediately say, no, this isn't a roadblock, it's an obstacle. And there's a difference, because a roadblock will literally stop you, but an obstacle just makes it difficult to get over. Right. And I think that the experience that you get from fighting, everything from dealing with adrenaline in a fight, right? Right. It's not that I have adrenaline every day, but understanding how to pace myself in a fight, applying that to business, down. And staying calm. Things happen, like something
order goes wrong.
If something goes wrong in business, you're like, that's no big deal. Like, trust me, this isn't nearly as bad as this time I got kneed in the face. Like, this we'll figure this out. This is solvable. Right. And so those kind of skills, that experience, you can bring that into the fight game. And then, granted, if I'm in a boardroom and I don't like what I see, I always have the ability to punch somebody too. Right. That's a skill. Doesn't get to get used in business very often, but I have it in my back pocket.
You might get a lawsuit, whatever. Yeah, but it'll solve the problem right there.
No, but it's amazing that when you do something like, it's like, there are some key pillars to being successful in life. Work ethic is one of them. It's like nothing replaces hard work. And as an example, and it's so cliche to even say that anymore, but it's like beyond these pillars, then it's like, well, if you're moving into fighting, there's a certain niche skills that you need to have. If I'm going to be a heart surgeon, there's a different set of niche skills that I need to have. Yeah. But those niche skills are still built upon a foundation that rests on these pillars of things like hard work.
Right. Yeah. And also believing that you can.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
Yeah. Probably confidence is another thing. Having a fight career and just knowing that I've been through battles, right? My fight career, a lot of my fights I guess that's probably what I'd be known for, is like just being kind of like tough as nails. So it's like I can push through anything if I have to. It's like I'll grind through obstacles,
right? And especially from losing the belt to dealing with that mentally.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So that all that stuff it crosses over for sure.
So if you had to look back on your whole career to date, would you have imagined yourself where you are?
Dude, there's no way. Yeah,
there's no way, right?
No. I mean, I think about this in every phase of life that that I do, and I'm wholeheartedly believe that I'm on a guided path by God. Like literally, like this, like God has just like touched me, and and I try to be a light for Him in the world at some point in time. But like I said, if you were to see pictures of me in high school, and you won't find them on the internet, because that was pre-internet days anyway, right? Yeah. So, but if you were,
God.
yeah, exactly. But it's actually more of a testament to my success. But the reality is, like when I look at those, I'm like, there's no way that I could have succeeded. And there's just like little other things in life. Like it's just doors open and paths just seem to just appear before me, and it's not. It's just it'd be quite presumptuous of me to say like, oh yeah, I did all this. Right. Like I'm not going to take all that credit. There's other things at work here. Yeah. And so I sit down and look. I'm like, I don't know how I was a guy who, I'm the first child and only child of my family to graduate with a college degree, and so statistics would tell you that alone wouldn't happen. Yeah. And then I decided to leave that at a time when MMA was not a career that you would pursue financially, right? And end up doing really well as an athlete.
Yeah, the faith.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I'm not to say that there aren't like setbacks or failures in life. I tried running a restaurant and that failed, and primarily because I wasn't passionate about it, and I didn't realize that until after I got into the process. But it's like a little setback. I pieced off and sold some of the business, and then moved on from there. And then suddenly I'm working for a company in Singapore. And not that I ever wanted to live in Singapore, but I find myself living overseas and different experiences. And I come from a family where I don't know if anybody in my family has passports. Right? I mean, that's very common in the U.S., particularly in the Midwest. And so it's just like these little things where it's like the difference maker. And then I'm running the Warrior Series that we talked about, and I'm traveling to all these countries and going, even when as an athlete, like I've been to over 65 countries at this point in my life, right? And so to come from what I came from, being that poor growing up, and having these kind of opportunities and impact on my life, it's I'm like, I'm truly blessed. And that's why at this point I feel like I have a responsibility to kind of pay it forward when we talk about legacy and that kind of stuff.
Well, that's awesome, man. So if we were to close out, right? I mean, what advice would you give somebody from, let's say, your hometown that's thinking that, I want to be somebody, but I just don't know what that is?
If you don't know what that is, that's a problem, right? I mean, the thing is this. I believe that. I mean, this is a cliche statement, and I'll say this, and then, like, anything is possible, but it's not. I mean, if I wanted to fly, like literally fly like a bird, it is not possible. So just having an idea and believing in yourself is not necessarily the thing, but with that kind of caveat in mind, anything is possible, and you do have to believe in yourself. Like you have to believe in yourself, and then there's this faith element. But for me, that faith element is not having faith in myself. It's having faith that God is going to provide. And that doesn't mean that I don't know if God necessarily wanted me to become a world champion. I'm not saying that He did that, but it's like I think He was there to open the doors, and it's like, look, you do your job, you do your half, and I'll do my half. I'll give you these opportunities. I'll open this door. You just got to walk through it, type of thing. And so, I had this belief in myself, and I had this faith that there's this higher power working in my direction for me. And then it comes down to just execution. Yeah. And you have to figure, like, you have to have a clear vision on what it is that you want in life, right? And without that, and that's the first thing you need to do, is you need to sit back and game plan. Like, where do I want to be in life? What's my 5-year plan? What's my 10-year plan? Whatever these things are, whether it's financial goals or whatever these things are, and then you're like, okay, now I need a plan to execute. So it's like just believing in yourself. And people say that, like, in these motivational speeches, man, you got to believe in yourself. You got to work hard. It's like, well, great. If I work hard and I believe in myself, I'm going to get there. But the reality is, it's like that strategic planning on that hard. Like, I can work hard. I was driving a truck one time with my dad. I was 13 years old, and my dad, he had this old 1978 Scottsdale pickup truck, and it was just 2-wheel drive. But there was this creek bed that dried up in the fall time near my house, and so my dad takes me down to this creek bed, and we go driving in this creek bed, and it's like loose dirt and sand.
Right.
And
Cracks in the ground.
Yeah, but it was a lot of like, it looked just like that truck too, and a lot of loose dirt and sand. And so my dad takes me down there, and he's like, he's gonna let me drive and go off roading, and I'm in the driver's seat, and so we're kind of going down this thing, and then I'm coming up to a bridge, and the bridge has this concrete pillar,
Right.
and my dad's like, stop the truck, because we're about to hit this pillar.
Yeah.
So I'm pushing the brakes, and it's just one of those brakes where the brakes aren't necessarily catching. Like, you have to depress the brake pedal all the way down. And as I do, the truck slides, and then it ends up burying itself to the axles in sand. So my dad's out there, and he's trying, like, at first he tries to kick the tires, and it's just spitting sand out, and it's just burying itself for us. So now we start getting, like, looking for rocks and wedging them under the tires, and if you've ever done any off-roading, because he doesn't have a winch on the front of this thing, and it's not four-wheel drive.
Yeah.
And so, we're out there, we're working hard. And after about 45 minutes of working hard, the truck was in a worse situation than it was than when I buried it, right? Because you're desperate. But that's where hard work will get you. Like, if you don't have a solid game plan, then you're just going to make your situation worse, right? So you have to strategize, and really what you need to do in life is work smart. And if you work smart, working smart oftentimes is going to be hard work, but many times working smart will be slightly easier than just working hard, right? And so it ended up that there was a gentleman that saw us stuck and was like, hey, y'all need some help. And then he came down, he had a winch on his truck. And so suddenly we devised a plan that we didn't have before, because we didn't have the tools at hand, right? I mean, we're just buried, and we're like trying to put rocks, like, this is the best we got. Yeah. And so now we have a plan. It's like, well, we're going to tie off to this and pull you out here. And smart work, and pulled right out of the hole. And so that's really, what I've learned about life is that you have to work hard, but you just got to work smart. And so figure out what it is that you want, and then make sure that you actually want that thing too, right? Because I go back to what I said before about sacrificing. In my fight career, I never really viewed myself as sacrificing. Every night that I was at the gym till 10 or 11 p.m., like, that wasn't a sacrifice. I loved being there. Right. But it was a sacrifice for, my family, or my relationships. Yeah, right. It's like, suddenly your wife is sitting there like, when are you going to be home from the gym? Like, this is my time to hang out with you. It's like, I got training to do tonight. And so she would have to sacrifice. And but no, you figure out what you want and make sure that you really want it, and then you need to strategize on how to get that thing. And oftentimes you can develop a better strategy, just like the truck analogy, when somebody came down that understood also how to do some four-wheel driving, that had the proper tools. Right. It's like, so get help from people that know what they're doing, and then strategize from there.
And that's another instance where God showed up, right? Because you guys are spinning your wheels, literally. Yeah. And then this guy just happens to be driving by.
I was 2 weeks out of my Forrest Griffin fight, and I'm driving to the gym. There's about it's another 6-8 inches of snow on the ground type of thing, and this woman is pulled off to the side of the road, and I can't tell if she pulled over because maybe she was lost or if she slid off. So I decided to stop my truck, and I knock on the window, and I'm trying to talk to her through the window, and she's scared, and I was like, I said, do you need help? And I'm yelling, and so finally she cracks my nose. She's like, I said, did you slide off, or are you just parked? She goes, no, I'm stuck and I can't get out. And I said, well, I said I'll help you. I have my truck and four-wheel drive, and I frequently do this in the winter. I like helping people out. It's really cool. I actually helped a guy that was stuck one time on the highway, and then he realized who I was, which was really cool. But she says to me, she goes, "Oh Lord," she said, I prayed to God that He would send me an angel to help me get out of here, and you just showed up." And I said, "Well, ma'am, I'm gonna tell you this right now." I said, "If you've been praying to the Lord for an angel to show up and I arrived," I said, "you better work on your prayer life." Right? But no, I ended up getting her out of there, and she was so grateful. And those things, man, I mean, they make you feel good, right? And so being able to, something as simple as, it takes time out of your day, but just stop and be like, "Hey, you okay? Like, something I can do." Of course, I subsequently had to roll around in all this wet snow, tying off underneath in the axle and everything.
You felt great.
Yeah, right. At the end, I was like, I did a good thing today. Yeah.
Well, hey, thanks for coming on the show, man. It's good to see you in town.
It's good to be here, man.
Yeah, we'll catch you another time, right?
I appreciate this. Yeah, you need to...
maybe we'll up the decor.
Up the
next time
foliage
you come.
in here. Yeah. I like it, actually.
Yeah.
It's simple and easy.
Well, that was awesome, man. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Thank you for tuning into the show. If you found value in what our guests shared and what we share on the show, please feel free to share with your friends and family. We'd love to see you back here. Thank you again. And you can find us on pretty much every social media channel. You can find us on every social media channel, such as LinkedIn, Zekin, YouTube, Facebook, X, TikTok, to name a few. iTunes and Spotify as well. Thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. Step into the Unscripted Arena. Subscribe.